As a young child, I was told by my father to always protect my sister, even though at some point she became taller and stronger and bigger than I, even though I was the eldest. Who would have thought that she would harass me and abuse me verbally and sometimes physically? And my mother would always blame me for whatever she did. Years later, she admitted to me one night when she had been drinking on the phone when I was living away from our hometown that it was so funny that she had gotten me blamed for everything. When I had the opportunity that same week to speak to my mother, I told her, and she didn't believe me. When you go through life not being believed, it affects you in a very detrimental way. You don't know how to believe in yourself. You don't believe compliments that are made to you. You don't believe that you are capable of anything. But then you reach deep inside and know that you are, and you just keep searching for your entire life. I think the reason my mother couldn't believe it is because she would have had to reconcile in her mind that she had blamed me wrongly. And I think that's probably what it was. When I had a chance to speak to my father many years later, he said that my mother had never shared any information with him, which I can readily believe. She did not know how to communicate, and she passed that on. But thankfully, I learned how to communicate. But it took my husband leaving. Not that he was a good communicator. He was much worse than I. My problem was that I went along with whatever he wanted and did anything I could do to make him happy, giving up all of my dreams. And I am still searching for them. But back to my one sibling, I have reached out to her for years, over and over and over, hoping that I could have a real sister. But I believe from her actions and the way she behaves that she's just waiting to take whatever she can, just as she did with my parents and my uncle. My uncle died on Christmas Day, 2015, and immediately that same day, she insisted on going to his house, which had previously been my grandparents', and going underneath the bedroom floor and getting the coins, silver coins, that he had saved that had been left to him by his uncle, taking them out of the house illegally and transferring them to my father's. I was horrified. I was such in shock because my uncle always recovered, and this time he had not. And it was one of the saddest days. And how could she do this? He had hinted to me that she would be his trustee, but before that he had said that I would be. So we really didn't know. And she was doing all of these things without telling me that she did know. That came out later. It was a complete mess, and my mother was deteriorating, and my father at the same time. Thankfully, I received one annuity, but I was so afraid of her that I couldn't say anything. The insurance agent that came to meet with me said that he would never speak to her again. She had called the insurance company because she had a piece of paperwork that I had found and given to her, and had no idea that my uncle had only changed the beneficiary a few months before his death. I was so grateful, I almost fell on the floor because I had nothing. I had a tiny condo with virtually no money left. Divorce kills your finances, and it had been a long time. And I had made that money from my half of the house last for over 10 years, which is amazing, really. I don't think that many people I know could do that. The insurance agent had been harassed and bullied by her just as I had. It was completely inappropriate and unacceptable. He said that he had annuities that he could help me with or help me reinvest, but when I called his office, he wouldn't even speak to me. What I didn't know was that she had harassed him so badly that he was afraid to have anything to do with me or her. He wanted completely out of the situation. She continued to make a mess of everything and drag it out. In the end, with my uncle's estate, she took $25,000 in administrative fees for doing virtually nothing, really. Then my mother died. Actually, I will go back. My mother died before my uncle's estate was settled. She waited until after both my mother and father had died to settle my uncle's estate, which was unacceptable. As I said, it was just crazy, and it was a mess. My mother died, but before she did, my sister took all of the checkbooks, all of the accounting information out of their house and to her house, and I truly believe that she was paying for her groceries and Amazon bills and whatever else she felt like out of their accounts. Now, this isn't someone who needed any money. They had an amazing business and they were making amazing amounts of money, and they didn't need any more. But greed fosters greed, and that's who she was, and that's who she always has been. I remember when we were children and went to a county fair, and she asked my father for money, and he just gave her his wallet and said to take a $5 bill. Well, she took a 20 and told me later. This is just an example to show you what she would do and she would take advantage of. It's just unbelievable, and I just shake my head when I even think about it. I have tried to put it behind me, but maybe talking about it will help at this point. When my mother died, she immediately, behind my back of course, had an attorney go to my parents' house, and my father was not of a mindset to make any decisions. And she had a quitclaim deed done and a distribution of assets. The person that had helped her was one of my mother's brothers, and he was guilty of being an accessory, really. I found out later I could have sued. I could have taken her to court, but she was my sister. And I just couldn't do it. And I had friends that were angry at me for not doing it. I thought that if all she cared about was the money, it didn't matter to me. When the lawyer's office went back to my father's house to have him sign the forms, she had already coached him, and I know this to be a fact, and he crossed out both our names and put my brother-in-law's name on the distribution of assets of whatever was inside the house. So that was conflict of interest. Her attorney allowed her to do so many illegal things, it was unbelievable. At one point, I called the tax assessor's office to find out what the taxes would be on the house, as she had not changed that, so we each owned half of that property. And she said that she had just received a new deed with my brother-in-law's name on it with my name. Now that is not legal. You have to get the permission of the other owner, which would have been me, to sign off to allow it. And she didn't do it, and her lawyer didn't stop her, and he actually committed fraud doing that. There's so many people I could have gone after, but I didn't. Because, like I said, all she cared about was money and things. And for me, all I care about is the people. And the worst part of this entire thing for me was that she betrayed the trust of my uncle, my mother, and my father. And I hope wherever they are, that they know what she did. It's beyond me how they trusted her with anything because of everything she did as soon as she turned 18 and before and in her adult life. So it makes no sense to me. I had moved away for several years, but I had been back for several years when this all happened. I will never understand her mindset. Other than that, she is a narcissist, but she also has some sort of personality disorder. I love her because she's my sister, but I don't like her behavior. And even now, when I have things to give away, I let her know, and she is right there to take. And I know that she's just waiting for something to happen to me so she can try to take something. But my advice is make sure that you have beneficiaries on your bank accounts. She will not be able to touch anything if something happens to me before it happens to her, because there are no guarantees in life, and that is what she does not see or comprehend. She has more money than she knows what to do with, and she is pinching pennies so badly that sometimes I laugh about it. It makes no sense to me. Absolutely none. She always has said to me that I'm good at living poor. Yes, I am. It's easy for me, and I can still look like I'm not poor. It's just crazy what happens with families, and I've been told by many people that this is exactly what happens. And I consulted with several lawyers, and they all said the same thing, that there's always one that will do something like this. What matters to me now is to find a way to make my own way, even at the age I'm at, which isn't entirely old, but I would love to move on or move back to where I was living then, years ago before I came back here, or move to Europe. That would be wonderful, to meet someone and to move away. That's what I always wanted to do when I was married, and he went against everything we had decided. But end of story on that one. That's a whole different story. The point is, make sure you set everything up so that no one can fuck with it. Pardon the term, but that's just the way it is. And that's what I've done. She cannot touch anything, but I guarantee you, if something happens to me before it does to her, that she will do everything she can to fuck with my estate. And I hope she cannot do it. And I made that very clear in my will and on my bank accounts. She has no right to anything. I still attempt to communicate with her, and she answers when she feels like it. And that's just the way it is. It's just so heartbreaking that you can have a sibling or siblings that really don't care about you. And you just have to accept it and find friends that care about you. I'm so good at being alone because I've had no choice. And that's just my take on all of this. And be careful with how you set things up and whom you trust when you set up a trust or a will or whatever it is. And be sure that the person you choose to be a trustee is trustworthy. And that's my message. Thanks for listening.